Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Cash Flow Positive. I'm your host, Kenny Bedwell, and we're going to be talking about the future of short-term rentals. And I believe this is not just future 5-10 years from now. I'm talking about this year and next year, what we're going to see change, and how things are already changing, what you can do to be better prepared. And if you're looking to further invest in short-term rentals, how to find properties that will stand the tales of time and last, because that's the most important thing. Is we want to last. We want to be able to exit and make money on the exit, and not just to have a property sitting there that we have to resell as a residential home that didn't make us any money. So let's dive into the future of STRs look bleak. Now, when I am looking at the short-term rental space right now, first off, let's talk about a little bit of data with the short-term rental space. Overall, year over year, we saw a huge dip down from summer of 2023 to summer of 2024. And then we're even seeing, and when I say huge dip, what I mean by that, it's about a 20% dip. We saw about a 50% dip in booking lead times from summer of 23 to summer of 24. As we're headed into the summer of 25, we're also seeing not quite as big of a dip, but we're seeing about a 10% dip in lead times. Okay, so what does that mean? It means that the market's actually softening a little bit across the board. People are booking last minute. We know in the economy there's a lot of uncertainty, and it's carrying over to short-term rentals, especially in fly and destination markets like big cities, some of your beach markets where people aren't booking as far out. The consequence of that is that ADRs, or average daily rates, are dropping. And so going back to this whole, looking at the industry as a whole, and what's going on is we are seeing revenues dropping across the board. We're seeing it dropping for bigger properties. We're seeing it dropping for super properties. And we just overall, there is a lot of uncertainty going on in the economy and with short-term rentals. Okay. I tell my team, when we're evaluating properties and we're looking at data from STR Insights, we have to be very careful of you just relying on the trailing 12. Okay. Because the reality is, the trailing 12, will the trailing 12 reflect the future 12 months? And when I say trailing 12, I mean trailing 12 months. Hopefully you got that. But that's what I mean by that. It will reflect the future 12 months. If the property was as is, it probably won't. And that's why we have to kind of take some of those things into account as we look to improve properties as well. But the reality is there is a softening in the market going on, even for super properties. And so what does that mean? What does that mean for you? And obviously, is that going to impact, does that make it where short-term rentals aren't even investable anymore? The answer is no, and it doesn't mean that you need to panic or there should be room, because it's only a slight dip. Okay, it's a slight softening. It's like 5% year over year, but the fact that it is dipping down is a pause for concern. But that doesn't mean that investing in short-term rentals is a bad play and you shouldn't invest in short-term rentals. It just means you have to be smarter about it and more strategic about it. I was listening to some podcasts and watching some videos of some, just other people in the space that I pay attention to, and, hearing some of the interview stories, and they're, interviewing people, and they're like, I got started with this cute 1-bedroom, we only put $50,000 in and all into it. And, we advanced and it blew up and we're making all this money. And so we're able to take that and roll into the next investment. You can't do that today. That's going to be really, really, really challenging to find. And so first off, if you're trying to do that, that's not going to happen, or you're going to have a hard time doing that. You have to invest, and you have to approach investing in short-term rentals differently today. It is a maturing industry. The industry itself, the future of short-term rentals, the future of it is literally not bleak at all. It's actually very positive, and I think we're going to see it turn more commercial. But with being more commercial means it's more professional. And I don't just mean getting 5-star reviews. I think getting 5-star reviews is really not that challenging. That's a low bar. It's getting repeat guest clients people, and then what I call raving fans, people raving about your property, whether it's to local family and friends or other people, but basically where they become a repeat customer in the future. You need repeat business and consistency to survive and thrive. It's about finding the right properties in the right locations, and also understanding, like trying to find properties where you have lower expenses. One of the biggest deal killers that we're experiencing, and these properties make a lot of money, like gross money, is just the expenses are too much, and expenses are increasing. We just got, a notice from our cleaner saying we're going to raise your cleaning rates like $200, and we're like, that's not going to work, and so we got to go find a new cleaners now, and it's just really like there's a lot of stuff going on where it's challenging. It can be very challenging to make the numbers work today. And so what I'm seeing is it's not as simple. It's not as easy as it was 2 years ago, 3 years ago, or further for that matter. I mean, when I launched in 2017, it was just like, let's, a bedroom with a bed that the sheets look clean and, some shots on the cell phone and we're good to go. Like that was good enough to make money. And obviously it's changed. First off, the future of STRs investing is you have to be willing to invest. Every single year, when I first got started in finding properties for people, I was really big on like, hey, we can look for, if you got $50,000, we can find something. We can figure it out. We'll find a really cool condo and update it and do these really cool things to it and, whatever. But the reality is like, that is extremely hard today. And we just don't take on people like that anymore. We can't, because it's extremely difficult to find opportunities and deals without having the capital to invest into the property. Now, we talked about seller credits before and concessions, and that can expand your buying power. You have to leverage those things or you're going to spend even more money. And so but the fact of the matter is, like, you have to be willing to invest in the property. Time and time again, I see people wanting to buy turnkey, ready to go, already cash flowing properties. That just doesn't exist because they're selling them at a premium. And so when we're investing in short-term rentals and we're looking at future short-term rental markets as the markets soften and become more competitive, we have to learn to invest into the properties and invest the right way. So what I mean by the right way, let's talk about that. Let's break that down. We need to look at elevated design and decor and amenities. Also focusing less on creating what I call like copy paste properties. What I mean by that is I'm seeing a lot of design companies, and I'm gonna do a whole podcast on this because it's starting to bother me a little bit, and we're not going to see the repercussions until maybe a year or two from now. But I'm seeing a lot of design companies, like they come in and they literally give you the same amenity package that they've done for all the other clients they do. And what I mean by that same amenity package, I mean like, pickleball court, hot tub, barrel sauna, fire pit, game. Okay. Like, I mean, those are probably like the 4 most talked about. Movie theater room if you have space for that. But like literally those amenities I just named are like the most talked about, the most, whatever. And even the fire pit designs are all about the same. They all have the same string lights. Like it's all literally the exact same thing. Just boop, boop, factory, right? Assembly line. Okay, give them the package, then give them the package. And there's very little variation and uniqueness to those types of designs beyond just like it's a appealing property, because we're transitioning. And I think this is really important, like where we're transitioning and how you approach investing. So understand where we're at and where it's headed. And if you can approach it, like play chess, not checkers, meaning like if you can look into the future and think like how things will be next year and the year after and approach it that way, you will be successful today. What I mean by that is like today, the conversation is you have to use a professional designer. I think everybody listening to this conversation understands that. Last year, the conversation was not about professional designers. People were using them, obviously, but it was more so about understanding you need to use dynamic pricing, right? And we think about that today, and it's pretty silly. Like, oh, yeah, of course you need to use dynamic pricing. But the reality is, like, we know, like a few years ago, there were people who weren't using it. And there are still some today who aren't, but almost everybody is using dynamic pricing today. You have to survive. Next phase is, and this is what's going on now. is this, and I would say it's a trend, it's just how it is of a business maturing, is elevated design and decor and amenities. But the problem is we're seeing all these designers come in. There's a ton of designers now, just like there's a ton of revenue managers now. And there's nothing wrong with that. I'm not like critiquing that at all. I'm just saying pick up the patterns, like pick up what's going on in our industry and know how to leverage that for your advantage. So we're seeing all these designers and these companies roll out where they just like pull in they'll give you the package, and they'll set up everything for you. And it's, they do a mural, they'll do a game room, they'll do the pickleball court, they'll do the barrel sauna, the hot tub, the game, boom. Okay, next house. And it's the exact same thing. It might not be the same mural. It might not be the same pickleball court colors. And you're competing against properties that don't have it, right? Like, so it's elevating your design, decor, and amenities. And that's what's the talk about today. And that's what's successful today. And that's what you need to have to be the best property today. Okay. But what this really is I call it the amenities arm race or design arms race, or we'll call it elevation arms. I don't know, just whatever. Like, it's an arms race of what do I need to add to try to stay one step ahead of people? What if you could get 2 steps ahead of everybody else? What does that look like? Here's what it looks like. And I'm gonna spoil. I'll do, like I said, I'm gonna do a whole episode. I really show examples because you guys won't understand if we don't give examples, because it requires vision. And I'm not gonna lie, like this is an area that I struggle with, and I find people who have this vision, and I don't say I steal their ideas, but like I take them and use them. But that's just the problem, is that you don't want to create something that's super easy to replicate. You need something that gives you uniqueness. And that's the next level. If you want to stay 2 steps ahead, it's not about the amenities package alone, but what you specifically do to those amenities that speak to your target audience. What I mean by this, and we've done some, there's been some examples, like it's kind of like subtly hinting. And I'm telling you guys, like, other podcasts, other videos, people are catching on to this too. Like the influencers and gurus out there are all picking up on this. We're going to have more unique properties. Okay, we're going to have more unique stays. And no, I don't mean like, spaceships in the middle of the lake. And not luxury properties. Like everything is luxury, right? Everybody has the barrel sauna, a cold plunge. Oh, I want a spa retreat. I hear that all the time with investors. Oh, I'll make it a luxury spa retreat. Okay, cool. How many times does it take before that becomes the market norm? And that's where we're headed, right? So my point and what I'm trying to make is, with the future of STRs, is we're changing to this world of how can we be more unique and stand out? Okay, and yes, you will probably have to have the hot tub, barrel sauna, the package, right? The game room, yes, that's become the norm. But how do we avoid the amenities arm race? How do we avoid the design arm race, where we don't have to like keep elevating our design, decor, and amenities every single year? And it's two ways. Number one, having properties that have a moat. I talked about that a lot, meaning something that separates you from everybody else and being different and unique. But more importantly, though, it's how you market your amenities. And I'm not just talking about good pictures. That is another thing that's obviously become the norm now. Last year, there was a big push on getting better pictures. Here we are today, where that's the norm, and you have to be willing to invest into good pictures and staged and so on. We've been talking about this. If you pay attention to the podcast or been listening for a while, I talk about I've had photographers on here, and we talked about that. And so now it's moving from that to how can we create marketable experiences in our photos, right? So it's not necessarily about just the photos themselves, taking the picture of the hot tub, but how can we actually create a really cool hot tub looking experience? Okay. And that's what's really going to set you apart. Is it putting a charcuterie board on a hot tub? Unfortunately not. Now, going back to what I was talking about earlier, will that photo look really good? Absolutely. Will it stand out today? Probably. In most markets, it would. Maybe not in the more competitive markets, but that's just the thing. Look at the competitive markets and look at how those are going. And that's going to start telling you, like, look, this is where the trends in the industry are going. I'll go into the Smokies or, Scottsdale or Orlando, and I'll see what people are doing. There's some crazy stuff people are doing in those markets. What I find is it starts to trickle down to all the other markets too. It's the amenities arm race. It's the marketing arms race of how you can stand out and be the most attractive person to go to. I hate those markets because you have to do that before everyone else does it in terms of, the rest of the markets out there. So I really don't like sending people to those markets to invest because it's very competitive. But we can learn a lot. Being in less competitive markets, we can learn from the competitive markets and see where trends are headed in our industry and who's on ideas that people are testing to try to stand out and see if it's working. And you can get data to use that to help elevate what your designs or what you think you need to add to your property to stand out from everybody else. So going back to the hot tub example, it's not just about adding the hot tub and the charcuterie board and taking a good picture. It's about, adding lighting and ambiance or, putting a cool pavilion over it. Or I've seen really cool domes over it as well with lighting in there. Like it becomes an experience and it becomes more unique. Now, you could argue and say, well, Kenny, I can do that to any property at any time and someone else can replicate that too. That's very true. And that's a possibility. But we want to remember, we want to stack these types of amenities on top of each other. And we want to do these things as we're launching, or if you're thinking about doing amenity refresh. Because the people who just put the hot tub with a charcuterie board and took the good picture of it, they're not going to make that change until they're hurting for revenue. Because it's the amenities on this, right? So how can we create space? Now, I picked a very common amenity that everybody has, everyone could, make better or whatever. Also, an idea with hot tubs I like to just throw this out here is like building them in decks, so they're down in the ground. I think those look really good. Make the hot tubs look better. So just an idea if you're looking to put in a hot tub and make it a little more special, where you kind of build a deck around it and people get in. It's just kind of cooler feel. But where I'm going with this is that's for amenity that everyone already has to have. But what can you do? How can you create elevated spaces and experiences on your property that are unique that no one else is doing? I think designers struggle with this. I do. I really, really do. I think they come up with really good designs, but we're seeing a lot of the same type of designs, the design colors, the boards, the styles, across the industry in multiple markets. We have a property in the Bourbon Trail. I can't tell you how many people are using, they're great designs. I think they look they're very attractive properties, but they all are starting to blend together. How can your property be unique in a space like that? Is it make it look like Harry Potter World in the Bourbon Trail? No, that's obviously not the feel. And it still needs to have a bourbon theme to it. But what can you do differently in a space or in, the outside or wherever that will literally no one else is thinking about doing, that you're going to approach differently, that you challenge your designer to not necessarily just do colors in here or something stupid like that, but be different so you can market it, because that's where the industry is headed. Creating spaces, marketable spaces, is how we're going to be successful with short-term rentals. I know for a freaking fact in probably the end of this year, with our clients, we're going to have to start hand-holding people through that. Before, we were just let's add the hot tub, let's do the fire pit, you're going to be good. That just doesn't work anymore. We have to be smarter about what we add to the property, and people struggle with that. You're probably thinking to yourself, gosh, Kenny, that sounds good, but what specifically can I do? Because you don't have the experience and the training, the vision yet, because it's a skill that you gain. It's not just something that right? It's like designs, being a designer. Sure, you can have an eye for it, but the first property that a designer ever designed, was it perfect? Heck no. Was it at the same level that they do today? I guarantee it wasn't. It's a skill, right? Some people pick up skills a little bit faster than others. It's the same idea here, being creative and being unique with your property. Some people are better at that than others. I can tell you I'm not very good at it, but I'm picking it up. I'm learning it. It takes a little bit more time for me, but I have to practice and practice and practice. And how do I do that? I look at hundreds of listings, not just in the same market, but in different markets, in very competitive markets. I go on Pinterest, I go on Google Images, I look everywhere to get inspiration and ideas of how can I be different in this market? How can I create something, a barrier of entry for other people so they can't just come in and replicate what I'm trying to do? Okay. Most of us aren't going to have a physical, like a property with a physical moat that everyone else can't literally copy. You're going to come up with a good property that will have some, like maybe it's good location. Okay. But there's a lot of properties with good location. Maybe it's a bigger property with 7 bedrooms. Well, guess what? There's a lot of properties that potentially could have 7 bedrooms or 8 bedrooms, right? So it's like we need to stack things together. But at the end of the day, as you start stacking, the people who can add those things and find properties that have those exact attributes starts to dwindle down. For example, the Kentucky, I keep using Kentucky here and I probably shouldn't, but yeah, I'll stick with the Kentucky one for now, because the property is a really good example. So the Kentucky property are 9-bedroom property. It's 9 bedrooms. Okay, that's huge. But not only is it 9 bedrooms, it has 7 bathrooms. It has a pool. It has 2 hot tubs, a bourbon-themed mini putt-putt course. It has a private pond that you can swim and fish and kayak on and all this stuff. A movie theater room, a yoga studio, game room. There's even like Frisbee golf. Like there's a ton of cool stuff to do with this property. And it's just, okay, cool. You can have a property with a pool, a 9-bedroom with a pool. Does it have 7 bathrooms? Probably not. But what if it did? Great. Does it have a pond? Probably not. Does it have you can try to add 2 hot tubs. You can try to add Frisbee. You can try to have but are you going to have a yoga studio, a gym, a movie theater room, like all these things aligned together? Probably not. That's really, really difficult and probably really expensive for people to try to replicate the exact same thing. It's because I've stacked all these really desirable amenities or features on top of each other. Now, it was expensive. And if you can't afford to do that today, don't go buy $1 million property of that size and try to replicate it. Do something smaller. And that's another angle too I want to talk about is like in the future with your investing, it's not about what you're pre-approved for from the lender that you can afford. It's about the cash on hand that you have to invest. That's what's going to make your investment decisions. Going back to the $50,000, it's not enough. You have to save. Okay. $100,000. That's hard, but doable on a very small property. Okay. And so most people we're working with today have like 150 or more. And there's just a lot more like flexibility with that because they have the power to invest in the properties and do something special and create something special. And so in future investing in STRs is not just going to be what can I afford from the bank, but what can I afford from an investment standpoint into the value add and the amenity stacking standpoint? Because if you don't have the funds to compete, don't get in the kitchen. Don't bother getting in. You will get crushed by these people who took the time to invest in their properties and they're getting the bookings and they're making the money. Okay. Because that's really what you have to do. And look, there is no harm, no foul in saying, I don't have the funds today. I'm going to wait. I actually tell a lot of people that. I have conversations with a lot of people and they're like, yeah, like I want to buy the property with all cash and I only have 300,000. And I'm like, well, that's a lot of money. Why don't you finance? I can't, my credit score is bad. Wait till your credit score goes up. Just wait. Like wait till your credit, build your credit up. Then you can leverage. But you have to have the funds to be able to invest into the property, not only buy the property. And that's where we are headed in the future. So if you're thinking about buying another short-term rental, that's great. And it's a great investment. It's a great opportunity, but no, we're in a maturing industry. What worked last year or the year before won't work today. And when I say today, I don't just mean today. I mean like for the future, right? We want to buy investments that will stand the test of time. And in order to do that, you have to spend the money and invest into the property. You cannot skimp. If you're a frugal person, the best way to save is to do it yourself, which is going to take a lot of time. And if you're like, I don't want to do it myself, probably not the best investment to get into. Go buy long-term rentals. Go buy maybe midterm rentals because you don't have to add all the amenities and stuff. And that's why those have become really attractive. But if you're really wanting to compete and be the best in any market, you have to be willing to invest and create something unique. All right. Now, this is going to be the episode for this week. I'm not going to interview anybody. I don't want to talk to anybody else about And I'm going to be honest with you guys. Like I don't feel like a lot of people are talking like this yet. And the reason why is because they're not seeing the data. They're relying on the trailing 12 and what's worked in the last year and the year before. And so I, however, I'm seeing trends and patterns in the data that point me in the direction of like, look, things are changing, things are maturing, and the industry is growing and becoming more of a commercialized zone. And for those of you who have commercial assets or like hotels, it's very competitive and the margins are a lot more slim because there's a lot more operating costs, which one thing I kind of forgot to mention too, and I want to talk about, I touched that at the very beginning, but expenses are going to continue to increase. Insurance, we're seeing that, could be some markets it's tripling, double, triple, quadrupling. But you have insurance, you have taxes are going to be, taxes are constantly going up. You have other expenses. We're dealing with this issue with a cleaner. They're increasing their rates by, $200 and all these other fees and other things. Like I'm dealing it with all of them. I mean, this is the second cleaner this year that's raised rates on me. And that's normal stuff, right? Like I wouldn't say the prices are normal. I'm not justifying their pricing. I'm just saying like expenses will increase over time. And so we have to have a property too where we can improve it over time as well to increase revenue. So that's why I look for properties with land. Now I'm not looking for 20 acres, okay, because I don't want to maintain 20 acres. But I am looking for properties where we can do a phase 2 or phase 3 down the road to improve revenue and profits, and potentially if a new level of competition comes in, we have something we can do to stand out. But expenses do increase over time, and so we have to be. A lot of people think, well, your ADRs or your revenue will increase over time too, and from year 1 to year 2, that should be the case. Year 2 to year 3, if you're lucky, if you're really good at what you're doing, but by year 2, you should have everything honed in where your revenue is going to be. And if it increases year 2 to year 3, great. You made some, improvements. But if you're doing everything right, I really wouldn't expect a major uptick from year 2 to year 3. If you're doing everything right, even with a really cool property. So with that in mind, if my revenue stays relatively fixed or even goes down a hair and my expenses are going up, my margins are getting thinner. So how do I factor that in? How do I prepare for that? And we just have to be looking for properties that aren't one-trick ponies, right? And it all ties into creating something unique, creating spaces that are unique with your property that are marketable. You are taking on a marketing job. This is a marketing job. This isn't cool, I'm going to be hospitable. Everyone can be hospitable. All right. I rarely meet clients who I'm like, look, you know what? I should name names, but I'm not. I was like, I don't think they listen to the podcast, but they could. So I'm not going to name any names. Look, I'm going to say Johnny. Johnny, you're not hospitable. You shouldn't be a host. I have that conversation 2 or 3 times a year. I'm like, hey, you had a cool idea. You jumped. I'm proud of you, but this ain't for you. Like, go hire a property manager. Most people are really nice and can handle it, right? We can be hospitable. That's not the real job. The job is the operations and marketing. You are in a marketing industry. How can you market your property? And you're selling a property and an experience, right? That's what the marketing is. So you have to think about that with your investing in the future, because it's not going to be as easy as what's been in the past. If you do that, if you think like that, that will change how you approach investing in the properties, which properties you buy, and how you design, decorate, and amenitize them. And you will be successful. Cool. All right. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I hope you found value in it. I usually tell people to share the episode, but keep it to yourself because no one else is talking about this yet. I'm calling it 1 year from now. You're going to hear more about this, creating unique spaces and unique types of amenities. And I'm telling you right now, it's going to happen because we're seeing these copy paste amenity packages and design packages all over the place. Sure, the colors are different, the schemes are different, whatever it is, but they're all the same. I'm seeing the slides in the bunk rooms and the game rooms that say neon sign that says games. The arcade machines with the rope lighting, the blue rope lighting at the top of the ceiling. Like, that's really cool and all. But when everyone's doing it, it becomes normalized, it becomes the base, and it's no longer beneficial. Think out of the box. What can you do differently? Go online for inspiration. Look at hundreds of properties, not just a few properties. Be unique. Strive to create a unique product, and you will be successful. All right. Hope you enjoyed this episode, and I will see you next week. And I'll have the normal 2 parts. I like to do once in a while. Hopefully you enjoy this like one-off with Kenny. It's a little bit longer. I get to rant this was 30 minutes. I get to rant for 30 minutes, and you get to listen to me rant. I hope you picked out a few nuggets from this to help you, whether your current properties or if you're looking to invest in the future. I'm telling you right now, if you do this, like, you are going to be 2 steps ahead of everybody else, even 3 steps. And you are going to find a lot of success that way. All right. I'll see you on the next episode.